Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are going to be reviewing the film Leave the World Behind. All right, Sarah, do you want to kick us off with an IMDb summary for Leave the World Behind?
Sure. A family's getaway to a luxurious rental home takes an ominous turn when a cyber attack knocks out their devices and two strangers appear at their door.
All right, in Movies and Us tradition, let's start off with our one-sentence summaries for Leave the World Behind. Sarah, what was yours?
Mine is the anti-Sorkin.
So many things to unpack in that. Wow. Yeah, but accurate. Yes. I'm certain we'll talk about the screenwriting of this one. Your dude. All right.
My
my
dude.
summary
Yes.
is brought to you by modernity, paranoia, and deep Reddit hole theories.
Ooh, I like it.
All right. Let's start off with our initial thoughts of Leave the World Behind. And in this first section, we will not spoil the movie. We'll keep our thoughts high level. Sarah, the anti-Sorkin movie. How do you feel about an anti-Sorkin movie here?
I wanted to like this movie. I really, really did. There's a lot about this that I think is done really, really well. I think it's super creative, and I loved a lot of things about this. I think the characters or the actors give great performances. I think some of the themes that it tries to unpack are really, really interesting. The cinematography, the music, this house that I just loved. Like, there's a lot that I really, really enjoyed about this film, but I think it's just too long, and it kind of suffers from the law of diminishing returns. So the longer that you're in it, the more that I just was like, oh my gosh, when is this going to end? And the way that the film ends, I don't super love. Maybe that comes from my love of The West Wing and all things Aaron Sorkin. But I think that there's a way that this film, if it had been trimmed down a little bit, if it had been maybe a little narrower in scope, I think it could have been a lot more effective and could have been one of my favorite movies of the year. But I think it's just too long and kind of loses itself along the way. And so it's a mixed bag for me.
Very interesting. I'm intrigued to talk about specifics of what worked and what didn't work. I started off this movie in the first probably 15 minutes, really excited for this one as well. I was like, man, this is going to be fresh. This movie's got ideas. It knows how to execute quite well. I think that opening scene of the family in the car, and the way that that's shot from a cinematography perspective is so visually interesting. So I was just, buckling in, just excited for this fresh take on some interesting topics. And this quickly descends into like a little bit of chaos, and sometimes that chaos can be exciting, but I think that the pieces of this puzzle don't fit together at the end in a coherent way. So I feel like this is the like middle drafts of a script where you're figuring things out. You've got some great pieces in there, and there's some things that still don't work together. It's not quite crisply coming together yet. And this doesn't really land the plane at all for me. I felt the 2 hour and 20 minutes of ness of it all. And I think that had this film been a little bit more punchy and also had a much clearer thesis, I think that perhaps this could work a little bit better. There's a lot of topics and commentary and thematic parts of this movie that this almost feels like a collection of interesting things and little vignettes, but it doesn't work really as like a full narrative arc. And I think the characters, you could argue, have a little bit of a narrative arc, but not what I was hoping for. And I think that's also where the movie falters a little bit, is it doesn't grow the characters in any meaningful way, and therefore doesn't have anything to say with any of the quote unquote moments of growth that we see, especially in um, Amanda and Ruth's relationship, and then in some of the three men's relationship. So yeah, overall, I was thinking a lot about Don't Look Up while watching this movie. I think there's some interesting comparisons in there. And I do think that this movie is a much better movie than Don't Look Up. But ironically, I think Don't Look Up has a pretty clear thesis, and it's kind of what this movie is lacking. So that comparison was a little bit interesting for me to noodle on for a bit. This movie's a lot warmer and has more hope in humanity than Don't Look Up as well, which I also thought was an interesting perspective for a movie that's pretty cynical about the world and the state of the world right now. So all of that is kind of really fascinating. I'm excited to unpack it with you.
Yeah, that's super interesting to me that you were thinking of Don't Look Up. I was thinking about Jordan Peele and was like,
Mm,
what could Jordan Peele have done with this
mm.
idea? Like, and I don't know, I just kept comparing it to him. And I was like, man, what Jordan Peele is able to do is just special. And not everybody can do that. And I mean, that's not a knock on this director, because he's created really great things in the past, and he's very talented. But man, I was just like, what would the Jordan Peele version of this look like? It would be so much fun.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of interesting similarities too between Leave the World Behind and Nope. You know, that idea of this apocalyptic moment. And I think, yeah, Nope is a lot tighter of a film. There's a few key
Hmm.
threads that it's really looking to communicate. Those things interweave together, and then we get like half the number of characters too that we can really invest in, so that it kind of is efficient and trims the fat in ways that this movie doesn't. So that's a really interesting comparison. That one didn't come to mind, but it's very fitting. There's a lot of similarities.
And I just think it's so interesting that in a lot of ways, less is more is really a thing with screenplays and screenwriting and all of that. And I think, like you said, this feels like a middle draft that hasn't gone through series of edits yet. And I feel like if this had been trimmed down and really focused, this could have been a really, really fun, tight film that really packs a punch about some of these really important themes. But I feel like they all are just too much, and it gets a little muddled, and it ends up, you feel like, what are we doing here? I don't know. We're just kind of going through this grab bag of themes rather than walking through a really coherent story.
It almost feels like being inside of the mind of an incredibly intelligent, bright person that has so many interesting
Mm.
thoughts and opinions about the world, and
Hmm.
you actually do want to like unpack all of them, but they're kind of like whizzing around. There's that scene in I think it's Harry Potter 2 or whatnot, where they release the pixies into the room, and that's what this movie kind of feels like to me. Of just there's so many interesting ideas, and they're all so vibrant, and you could tease apart so many of them, and they're often just represented by like one line in the movie or one little detail in the movie, and you're like, wait, let's go down that path a little bit. But the moment's over and we're on to the next thing. And there's so much going on, but none of it is organized in a way that feels like it builds upon each other, that there's layers upon each other. The comparison to Nope is really interesting that you made, because Nope layers the themes and makes them more complex as new things happen. And that metaphor continues to grow and change and evolve as the movie progresses. And this movie, I felt like some of those moments, while they were interesting and good and thought provoking, they almost felt thin because we didn't get time to unpack it. So it was a thought, a line, and you're like, wow, that's really crisp. Like that's a lot there, and then it's over, and you're like, wait, I want more. So you get kind of a tease a lot of things, but um, not enough of a few big meaty ones. And that's kind of the faults of this movie. This is why I thought about it. Don't Look Up, because Don't Look Up also is kind of like covering a lot, just covering a lot, and a lot's on the nose with the details, and they don't feel meaty enough to really sink your brain into. But there's a lot going on, so it kind of feels like a stimulating experience until afterwards you're like, what? How does this all fit together? You know?
I'm just amazed that you remembered Don't Look Up. I have deliberately removed that from my brain because I hated every second of that movie. So I'm impressed that you retained some of that movie in the recesses of your archives.
Yeah, you really did like that movie. That was not
I hated that
you
movie.
you yeah. It's not your cup of tea at
it
all.
was it was so bad. I'm stressed just like thinking about watching that again.
There's a really great rant that you went on that episode around being able to do good satire and our seemingly
Oh my
rare
gosh.
ability to do that well these days.
Yes. It's
And
true
that being the
though.
perfect example of like, this is not satire. It's
No.
trying to
Oh,
be, but it's not.
it's trying. It tried real hard.
It did. Mhm. All right, well, let's include our spoiler here. So if you haven't seen Leave the World Behind, it is available on Netflix. I think I saw online a headline around it being like the top number one most streamed thing on Netflix today. So lots of people are checking it out. Go check it out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. All right, Sarah, I'm intrigued to hear. Let's start with maybe some of the things that didn't work for you in this movie, and then let's end with the things that we really loved about this movie, because I think we both have kind of things in both of those two buckets.
Yeah, I think it really just comes down to a lot of really good ideas not executed super well, and then I think not capitalizing on the moments where this movie really shines. So I think I loved the moments when it was just people talking, honestly. And so when they would like leave the house, so when their son's he starts pulling his teeth out of his head. That was when I was like, okay, what are we doing? What is this movie? I don't understand anymore. And then the whole like bit with Kevin Bacon, sure, that's interesting, but I don't know. I kind of wish that this movie had taken place primarily, and I guess it does take place primarily, but I wish that they wouldn't have left the house as much as they did. And I wish that these people were forced even more to really like grapple with who they are and these interactions with each other, and using that as a way to point to these larger themes and things happening outside of the house. But I don't know, for me, every time they left the house, I was kind of like, wait, what are we doing? Like, I don't know, the magic for me happened in those interactions between these four people primarily. And anytime a group would leave, I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm less interested in what's going on now.
Yeah, I think there's a version of this movie that is so character driven, and that being the meat and potatoes for the backdrop of all of the other big wild stuff that happens in this movie, with Tesla's crashing and drones dropping things. Like, those events then can push these people to collide with each other in interesting ways, which I think we get taste of. Um, we have some of those different pairings of people together and them having interesting conversations with me. But this reminds me a little bit of what White Lotus does really well, which is each character being, incredibly colorful and almost like a representative or metaphorical of like perspectives on the world or subgroups of society that we see today. And then what's interesting is how all of these different colorful personalities collide with each other. And I think your idea around them keeping them in that house could help facilitate that character driven version of this movie where we get to see how these people share their perspectives, and then how their perspectives hopefully either mold or change over the course of the movie based on these crazy events that are happening in the world that they're experiencing together, and also some of those conflicts that might occur as they try and like work through some of this. And I think this movie almost begins that journey but then doesn't fully commit to exploring what that could look like. but there's tastes of it too, you know. So that's why this is one of those movies where it's like, man, we can see so much of the foundational goodness here, but somehow we just didn't tend to that garden enough to reap the full fruition of it. But there's so much in these characters that I think are very fascinating in who they are, what their paranoias are, what their fears are, what their desires are, how then those like collide with each other in conflicting ways and rub each other the wrong way, or they kind of accept each other and start to grow together. Like all of that's very fascinating. And I wanted the character driven version of this movie. Everything else is just color and backdrop.
Yeah, I agree. And especially when you have such incredible actors in this. Like there's
Mm,
that bit
yeah.
in the middle of the film where it's Julia Roberts and Mahershala Ali just talking to each other, and I was riveted. Like I could have watched so much more of just them two talking, because so much is happening in that conversation. And you can see Amanda's growth from the start of the film, even though she hasn't like fully gone on this whole like transformative journey, which I'm glad that it's not as cheesy as it could have been. But you see her starting to like come around and understand him, and you're starting to understand GH a little bit better, and some of those gaps in his background and his history are being filled in. And both of these actors are giving these really interesting performances and communicating so much in just that one conversation. And I'm like, why can't we have more of that? Like that's that's really what I wanted from this film, and that would be a very, very different movie that I don't know, other people might not find as exciting, but I think it would be more meaningful and more impactful, because like you said, it's character driven, and then as these characters are wrestling with these topics, then we as the audience can wrestle with these larger themes because they're going through it. I don't know, I think it could have been much more powerful than what we got.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And instead, I think this movie's like more interested itself in these like interesting setups of things that the characters find themselves in, you know, with the drones, with the Teslas, with the deer. Like the movie itself is more interested and captivated by that. So then I'm like, okay, I guess that's our focus area. But those puzzle pieces also don't really come together at the end. That was my other qualm with this movie, is that it seems to insinuate that there's something bigger happening here, but not, it doesn't actually come to fruition, which is fine. But I feel like it I would have focused on some other aspects just to sink my attention into, versus all of these different details and people that we meet along the way, and specific like shots and close-ups of things that seem to be significant but don't really amount to anything. And I think of me feeling like a little bit empty at the end. I'm like, oh, okay, so there is no larger puzzle here. We're just here with some interesting commentary on stuff by visually showcasing some of these things that are representative of commentary and post on like this modern society that we live in. Like, got it. Would have liked to know that beforehand.
Yeah, yeah, I really struggled with especially the animals bit. I
I
was like,
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't understand.
I
And then
I
there's
didn't
all
either.
these lines about like the animals are warning us and stuff, and I'm like, uh, what what are they warning us about? Like if this was some cybersecurity hack and some, like foreign governments ganged up to do this thing to America, how did the animals know? I don't understand. Like, were these other nations communicating via carrier pigeon, and then the pigeon intercepted a message and then told their pigeon friends, and then like it spread through the animal kingdom, and now the animals are trying to warn the human? Like, I don't I don't get it. These two things never intersected in my brain. So I don't know. That was one of those things that I was like, okay, this is an interesting idea. And I think, talking about how we as people have treated the environment is really helpful, and even like climate change and climate like refugees and all of these things that will happen eventually, like these are really important things to talk about. I don't think that this is the vehicle to talk about them unless you're going to create a very drastically different movie. So again, it just feels a little unfocused to me, and I think if they had narrowed their scope some and removed some of these themes, then it would have been more coherent, and then we could really run with some of these things rather than just being confused.
Yes. This movie is like the first 15 minutes, you see the puzzle box, and you're like, oh my gosh, this puzzle looks so fun. This is a really cool image. I want to do this puzzle. Let's go. You pour out the 1,000 pieces everywhere. It's everywhere on your table. You're like, okay, it's okay. Like, we're going to start here, make the corners, make the edges. And then you realize this puzzle does not come together. Like, you won't get to see that final
Mm-hmm.
image at the end.
Yeah.
You know, there's the
Yeah.
hope, the setup, kind of the directional, like here's where we could be going. You get a bunch of pieces that you collect along the way, these little moments, and none of them intersect by the end at all.
Mm-hmm.
Not even like
Yeah.
there's some insinuations here that you can kind of like piece together and make some theories or stuff. Like no reasonings behind them. The teeth thing, I don't really understand the
Yeah.
teeth thing. Maybe it's from the bug.
What the heck?
Maybe it's from the bug.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know anything about tick bites.
I'm going to be very careful now after watching this movie because I would like to be able to smile and not have people run in the opposite direction because I'm just toothless.
Yeah, that's also why you should probably wear pants when you go into the woods, and like
Very true.
long socks, hiking shoes, all of the appropriate covering for when you go, adventuring. But
Yes.
he's also a teenage boy, so
Yeah.
there's that.
The concepts of caution
Yeah.
doesn't.
What is that?
What? Yeah.
Yeah. No.
There's that shot though of Julia Roberts and Hyla Harold that are just like screeching at the deer, and it's just a several succession
Yeah.
of shots of them just being deadpan, like what? And I would love for this to become a meme. Just what? Like here are these
Oh.
humans.
Yeah.
So good.
Also,
I'm
like,
cracking up.
what was the deal with the deer? Like, I didn't get it. And
No idea.
I had no guesses is the other thing. Like,
None.
I was like, this feels like this is supposed to be important, but I have no context clues here to try and piece some meaning together. So we just have a bunch of CGI deer everywhere.
My brain was flashing back to Lamb and just like mama sheep just like creeping over the hills, being like, I'm watching you, I see you, and
Oh,
I'm coming for
yes.
you if you don't behave.
Yeah.
And the deer were giving me similar energy. I'm like, oh, you do not look friendly. But apparently, according to Rosie, they were very kind. They were very generous, sharing information. Very thoughtful.
But
deer.
I don't get it. Also, like, you got to watch out for deer because they can be dangerous. They're very large. And if they want to run into your car, they can really, really dent it, which happened to my friend. She got hit by a deer. And that was not great to her car. So anytime I see a deer, I'm like, I don't trust you because you might try and dent my car. But that was not a problem here. But they were just ominous. Creepy deer.
I wasn't sure if they were going to tie this somehow to there's that conspiracy theory that some people have around pigeons and birds in general. Like birds aren't real, but they're just surveillance from the government. And
what?
They're all just like, yeah, surveillance drones, disguised as birds, and birds actually don't exist. I thought they were going to do some like funny commentary around like that whole conspiracy theory rat hole that people go down, which I don't know how that would tie in with the deer somehow, but something with like they're being used by the government as well to watch and listen. I don't know, something.
Ooh, yeah.
Because deer
there are
everywhere.
no animals.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
All animals are tools of the government for spying on the people. Even after the satellites stopped. Okay, here it is. The
Oh, okay.
satellites have stopped working, so they
Yes.
had to go to their backup plan, which is all the
Oh, the
animals.
deer.
And so they
Yeah.
had to call in all the animals from all around the
Mm.
world to spy on this family.
It's like Noah building his ark. He's like, we must summon them. Come, come, and we
Come,
will protect you. But there's a
be
trade here
spies.
we must make. Yes, you will become employed by us.
Amazing. Perfect. Okay,
Oh,
so
wow.
tools of the government.
Mm.
That is what those deer are. Great. Love it.
Cool.
And the flamingos.
That's
Flamingos in the pool.
right. It wasn't just the deer. Yeah.
Nope.
That's another important, interesting detail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Weird.
CGI was really rough on those flamingos, particularly.
Yeah. And they served no purpose. Like you could have saved money on really crappy looking CGI animals
Uh-huh.
and used that elsewhere. Another round of edits instead of the crappy CGI animals.
Oh,
Like that would have been better served in this movie.
yes. What were your thoughts on some of the other bits and jabs and commentary that this movie had on just, collection of things happening in the world, modern world today?
It is a collection of things.
Very good
Okay.
collection of things.
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm so frustrated with this movie is because these things are really important for us to talk about. Like
Yes.
the environment is important. Racism is important.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
cybersecurity is important.
Yep.
Geopolitical situations are like all of these things are very important for us to actually be talking about. And I don't think this actually facilitates a good conversation, though. This just leaves you confused at the muddled mess of important themes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting to me as well is that um, this movie doesn't seem to have a strong bent towards either like absolutely making these theories and possible future seem absolutely ridiculous, and they also don't seem to like play into like the way that the people that believe a lot of these possible futures really carry that like weight and anxiety about them too. Like it's oddly pretty balanced in its stance on some of these perspectives and just kind of presenting them as here are things that are maybe important for us to think about without infusing a ton of judgment and opinion in one direction or the other. I mean, more like a lot more neutral than I expected a movie like this to take. Like it would be so typical for this movie to kind of just make this all seem absolutely wild and ridiculous. And this movie doesn't do that. And it also is, there's a version of this movie that's just like really leaning into the like, oh my gosh, what if these things happen? Anxiety and paranoia. And the movie doesn't really do that fully either. And I think that's kind of fascinating to me. It's oddly much more matter of fact about talking about these topics and a lot more grounded than I expected it to be. Like even the people that have certain perspectives around these things are oddly grounded where they're not insane. They're not caricatures. They're not larger than life. They oddly feel like they really do have a good head on their shoulders and they feel like real humans in a lot of ways. I mean, there is that flair, of course, always. It's the boobies. But for what this movie could be and, the genre of like an apocalyptic thriller, this movie is oddly very grounded. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I think this movie is trying to say that you should become a billionaire prepper with the doomsday bunker.
Yes,
Like
of course.
that I feel
That
like that's the
seems.
takeaway,
Hmm.
you know?
And collect all of your physical media.
Well, hello. You
Hmm.
got to.
But the
Which is
irony
really
being, this is
funny.
this is a Netflix. Yes, this is a Netflix movie.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
it's
it's
great.
so good. It's so
That was
good.
such a funny little moment.
Hmm.
But I left this movie feeling so like hopeless. because it's this like, okay, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. So just sit around and watch the finale of Friends, which honestly, it's too soon because Matthew Perry just passed away very recently, so it's too soon to
Mm-hmm.
rewatch Friends. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know, this movie left me with this like this nihilistic feeling of like, what does any of it mean? Because
Oh,
it's
interesting.
all just gonna end. And so why not just rewatch Friends, rewatch The West Wing, but only the Aaron Sorkin seasons because there's nothing that you can do about it anyway. So just take care of you and collect your DVD box sets so that you can watch the world go away. I don't know, like it just, I took the most depressing view of that ending. And I don't know, I don't know that there's like a hopeful way to end this film, but I don't know. I was real depressed after this. I needed to go on a walk afterwards and like touch some grass cuz that was it was a little too dark for me, but
Oh,
maybe that's just me.
wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. There was that like perfect little moment that was made just for you when Rosie says, in response to the question, "Do you
Yeah.
watch The West Wing?" And she said, well, only the Aaron Sorkin seasons. And I was like,
Which
that
is the
is
right
tailor made for
answer.
you. Tailor made.
Yes, that is the right answer. If you're going to watch The West Wing, you only have to watch the Aaron Sorkin
Yes.
seasons because they're the best. Anyway, so sorry. Please continue.
Yeah. Well, I hope that was some nice little healing balm for your soul after this incredibly depressing ending.
Yeah.
It's interesting because that ending is also coupled with these moments of real warmth and reconciliation between these humans in the movie, which I didn't expect for this movie to have such an optimistic view of the ability for us as people to like work together and um, advocate for each other and be generous and be able to be molded in our perspectives and admit when we're wrong. Like almost in a lot of these pairings of people that ended up together, like the Amanda and Ruth, like beginnings of reconciliation and them beginning to understand each other, was oddly like like a turn in that relationship that I didn't expect to see, and like much more warm than I expected. And then the whole scene with Danny of them pleading for his help, and I was like, what this movie chooses to do with what Danny decides to help that kid or not is going to be, I think, pretty indicative of what this movie feels about humanity. And the next shot is him getting the medicine and getting helped, like, and it's all because Ethan Hawke Clay, just in his, American dad earnestness, just like wearing his heart on his sleeve. And that's the thing that turns this, independent survivalist dude to come and help them. Like, this movie is also like oddly quite optimistic about the nature of humanity and our ability to help each other, which I was not expecting at all. Like when those moments were happening, I was like, wait, in this movie, this is not the trajectory I expected we were going to go on.
See, I love that you viewed that through a hopeful lens because I did
How
not.
did, how did you view it?
Because Mr. Prepper is unwilling to help GH, who he has a relationship with, but GH is a black man
Mm,
and he is unwilling to extend any courtesy to him, even though they have a prior relationship. And it's
mm-hmm,
not until the white man comes and starts begging for his child's life that he is finally able to give some help. And so, even in that moment where he does the right thing, he does the generous thing, I was still like, wow, that is a pretty scathing indictment of just the state of humanity. And I don't know. I think
mm,
that's probably accurate in a lot of circles, but I was like, wow, we suck as people. And even when we do the right thing, we still suck a lot of the times.
mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I definitely took the more depressing view and the more cynical view of that interaction.
Mm. That's true. No, that's very true. That's fair. And you see that, I think, dynamic so much in the way that Amanda and Clay treat Mahershala Ali and his daughter when they first show up. It is so, so rampant. And they begin to build a relationship, but like the first interactions are so cold, so icy, and so distressful, and uh like it's almost even the progress that they make feels like we've started from -50 and we've only made it to maybe -25. uh I didn't expect this movie to give us any of that progress at all, and it's oddly it's just surprising to me that there's so much growth that happens in just what, 2 days, 2 day period for Amanda and Ruth. Like what? Didn't see that coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. uh do we want to talk about the cinematography in this movie?
Yeah, go for it.
I think this is one of the things that this movie does incredibly well, and I think this movie's like film going experience would feel so different had it been shot differently. There's so many interesting angles. The camera is moving in ways that you just don't see in a lot of movies, and it's so creative in the way the camera will turn on a shot and almost like do a 180, and we feel upside down in a lot of scenes, and we don't have a sense of place. We're in angles that you typically don't film a scene like that from. And I thought that did such a great job of creating that sense of unease where like the the worlds in films that we see through the more traditional cinematography angles and lenses, like we are not in that world anymore. Nothing about this world should feel familiar to us because things are awry, and the camera movement and the angles with which they shoot scenes from, I just thought helped contributed so much to that feeling of discomfort and feeling uneasy. And I thought that the like the the atmosphere that the movie was creating for the narrative really was supported well by cinematography. And it's been a long time since I've seen something that is so crisply tied together like that, and I thought that worked really, really well for me.
Yeah, it's so creative and it's so fun to just watch what the camera is doing. And there's certain shots that I think are so smart. There's one where you see GH and Ruth outside, and they're in like the lower third of the frame. And I just thought that that was so interesting. So there's all of these little moments like that all throughout, that it's like, wow, this is really breaking the rules of how you shoot a film. And so I think that that made it really fun to watch. And I think it's also paired really, really well with that score that is so eerie and ominous the whole time, and then we'll just cut out and be silent for a while. And so you're just constantly in this discomfort, just wondering what is going to happen, especially in those really like mundane moments. And it's filmed from this wacky angle, and you have this ominous score going on. So the film is really effective in creating that sense of unease in us, but I don't know that it actually capitalizes on our investment and our discomfort as well as it could have.
That's interesting. Yeah, it talks a big game at the beginning, I think, with the amount of unease, and things do go wrong. Things do go very wrong.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of the things that go wrong also are in the like middle to two-thirds section of the movie, and that kind of, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but like it really does lose steam. Like the big, flashy, dramatic moments of unease actually do happen a little bit earlier, and then we get this kind of like ending sequence that feels like there's a lot of extra there. But that score, man, for the first 30 minutes was so effective. I almost think that the first 30 minutes is the most exciting part of this movie because we don't know anything yet, and we're just in pure anticipation mode and just soaking in this world and these people and who they are. And that section is so much fun.
Yeah, and even how those characters are revealed, I think is really good as you're getting to know Amanda and Clay, and then later GH and Ruth. I think that that is so, it was so interesting to just kind of see how these people are formed, and kind of you're forced to almost confront your assumptions about them as you go along, especially with GH as a character, but it's true for all of them as you just learn a little bit more about them. And I love how all of that unfurled as we get to know these people as they're stuck in this house together. Yeah, I agree with you. That first section is by far the most interesting and exciting part of this movie, which is a real shame because there's almost a whole other 2 hours of this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you don't want your first 20 minutes to be the most thrilling part
Yeah.
of this apocalyptic thriller. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah,
not.
that's a bad
Maybe not.
sign.
Yeah. But even the way that, that first meeting is shot, I mean it
Oh,
harkens back
yes.
to, I mean, so many of these like strangers show up at your doorstep, you know, tropes that we see in movies, and that sense of foreboding of like, this doesn't seem like it's going to be good news. But why is that? And is it them? Is it there more things happening actually that we obviously find out? But they show up in like Mahershala Ali's in like a tux. Ruth
Mm-hmm.
is in like a gorgeous gown. You're just there's
Yeah.
questions flying around in your mind immediately. And I thought that the in that same scene of them beginning to meet each other, the contrast and the foil that Amanda and Clay are with each other is also really good at playing into just the tensions of that moment. I mean, we've all been in like situations like that where you clearly like the couple is like not aligned, and you feel the icy stares and the glares back and forth as they're trying to communicate with their eyes and navigate this really tense situation that they feel like they're in. And I thought that third dynamic, not just between these two pairs of people, but even within one of the pairs, the tensions at play there, and then also uh with GH and Ruth as well. They disagree on how they want to go about the situation. So you see these four people all trying to work out and have this polite conversation, and figure out the details together as they're fighting with each other and also fighting against each other on how this is all going to work out. And that is the type of character dynamics I think this movie, shines in. But man, I think that they nailed that sequence.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely agree. And one of my favorite things kind of about these two pairs uh is, like you mentioned, they're so different, not only like from each other, but like within the pair they're so different. And I loved that GH and Ruth have such different approaches to like all the microaggressions and the racism and all
Yeah.
these snide little comments. And I loved seeing that, because there's not just one way to deal with these things. And GH has clearly been bombarded with that kind of stuff his whole life, and
Mhm.
probably especially in his field as being a wealthy black man who deals with
Mhm.
probably a bunch of old white men's money, and he's just learned to smile and nod and keep going and being cordial. And Ruth is not having any of it. And I loved seeing that, how they each are dealing with Amanda so differently. And they're in conflict about that too. And I think that's a really interesting way to kind of show these generational divides that we're seeing, and how different
Mhm.
generations are confronting racism in our world today. So I thought that was just so brilliant the way that was done. Is one of my favorite things about this movie.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And I think what I loved is that we get a moment later on where Clay, he comes off as sweet, open-minded, America's dad, earnest as heck, but like that scene with him and the Hispanic woman on the side of the road, that was a gut punch for me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the again, the cinematography just like fixates on and stays right in his face, and you see the look in his eyes. And I think that shot is like seared into my brain because in the background, you hear her yelling, you hear her cries for help, then you see kind of just the coldness in his eyes to just drive away. And I love that they gave that character these other aspects of him to make him far more complex, and that there's a lot more behind this, like good natured, jolly, friendly American dad that we kind of have seen so far, and it's really out of his ignorance that he operates that way, not out of any like open-mindedness, kindness, ability to see people. He just is just kind of a bumbling, ignorant white dude, who is like probably really just not yet aware at all of his prejudices and his worldviews. And I think that scene I thought was so smart for them to include. Yeah, it really rounds out this character fully.
Yeah, yeah, and then you see his shame afterwards
Yeah.
too. His eyes well up as he's driving away, and he doesn't say that he had this encounter with this woman either. And so he knows he did something wrong, but he did it anyway. And so again, I think that that's an interesting thing to include for this character too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So good. Uh, all right. Other things that we wanted to talk about and mention with this movie.
Okay, I also loved this house. It's gorgeous.
Gush about
Jen,
this house. I want to
I
hear.
want this house. How can I find Kevin Bacon and many millions of dollars to build me this house? Because I want it. It's gorgeous. Like every time they showed the house, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, more time in the house. Show me another room. Like I
It
was
was,
pumped. It's stunning.
yeah, really, really gorgeous. Up there with the After Yang home for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Man. I would be happy
No.
with either of those houses, honestly. After
Okay.
Yang's house is probably more attainable, but both are gorgeous. I mean, if you're going to be stuck in a house, that's a pretty good one to choose from.
Mm-hmm.
I
Honestly,
mean,
yeah. Yeah.
that's a good choice. And
There's a
he
whole
has his whole bookshelf full of records. Like, come on.
a giant
Incredible.
wall. A giant wall of them. Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And a wide variety to choose from, too. So, plenty of entertainment.
Plenty of options. Yes. Oh my gosh. Good options for the end of the world for us.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
it's
we'll
it's a
collect our options
motivation
of,
to make money.
yeah, beautiful homes for us to
Yeah.
buckle down in.
Yeah, while the world ends. So
When
we
the
need
world
to
ends.
befriend a billionaire. So,
Cool.
anybody out there listening, if you are a billionaire, we would like to be your friends.
Yes. We just want the basement. That's all. We'll be the basement rats.
I mean,
Okay.
honestly.
Yeah. We'll be very
It's gorgeous.
So pleased.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking at my notes as well. I thought there was a little commentary that they included there, which I thought was just kind of an interesting little job with the show Friends around. I think it was either Amanda or Ruth who said like, this is basically nostalgia for a time that doesn't exist. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought because we are in such a nostalgia trip right now in media in general, that it's the thing, it's the trend. We're remaking all of the classics apparently because we can and because we need it and we need comfort. I just thought that like that whole theme around the comfort of our media and what it really does for us when things are chaotic and confusing in the world, I thought this movie captured quite well. I mean, the whole ending sequence of her just watching that finale for her favorite show as the world is literally going to shit, like that, it cannot get any more obvious than like this is a big role and place that art plays in our lives. And you see a little bit of that in that scene with GH and Amanda, and they're just listening to music, to some of their favorite records, you know, and like that's a moment of respite for them in this very anxiety inducing, chaotic moment in their lives. And you see the joy on their faces, you see them laugh together and dance and be free for a moment. And I thought that that seemed like such a present theme throughout this movie. Just the role that media and our art really does play for us and how important we rely on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely is important. And I also, I don't know, I loved that she was watching Friends. Like that's such a smart choice. Like of all of the uh I don't know, more retro, for lack of a better term, TV shows, that's like the most iconic of them. And that for many is the ultimate comfort show.
Mm-hmm.
Because you really do feel like you're just hanging out with your friends. And I don't know, so many of us have watched it and will re-watch it just because we need that extra comfort. So that was it's such a fun little touch point, but also helps you build empathy with this character and know, like, oh yeah, no, I do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Especially because she's a young person too, and just
Yeah.
the weight of the world of like modern life is just a lot for young generations in general, and we see that and that discourse happening right now in the generations that are growing up right now and everything that they're bombarded with today, and them figuring out ways to navigate that and the things that they rely on and they use to just find moments of joy, you know. I thought that was kind of an interesting theme. You could also read it as just like we like escape reality with these. I mean, I think there's like both sides of that coin there. Other people might interpret that a little bit more cynically, but I thought it was a sweet thing this movie included.
Yeah. Plus it's Friends. Who doesn't love
Yes.
Friends?
Yeah.
Like, it's just one of those shows.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. All right. Any other last thoughts about Leave the World Behind before we wrap up?
There is a continuity error that I spotted in this
Where is
movie.
it?
It's when Clay and Ruth are sitting outside vaping together.
Mm-hmm.
They're having a conversation, and at one point he doesn't have the vape pen in his hand, and then the camera pans to her, and like she doesn't have it either, and she doesn't like hand it back to him, and then in the next one it's in his right hand and it wasn't in there before. So there's some issues with where that pen is in their conversation.
Nice. That's a good one. Yes. You're often aware of like pens and things and rings and hands and all that goodness.
I don't know why. I was talking with a friend the other day, and she was like, I never notice rings ever. Why do you pay attention to these things? I was like, I don't actually know. I just do. And I feel like continuity errors are the same thing. Like even when I was watching it, I was watching, and then I saw that the pen wasn't where it was supposed to be, and I had to go, wait, hold on a second. So I had to like back up 10 seconds and make sure that I was actually correct. Because I don't know, it was just something was out of place and my eye caught it.
And the great
It's
thing
weird.
is that because you're watching on Netflix on your screen.
Yes.
Yes. You
I
can
had
do
confirmation.
it. Uh-huh. Yes.
Yeah. That's satisfying.
It is very
And I'm
satisfying.
like, oh, I was right. Yes.
Immediate gratification. So good.
Mm-hmm.
Movie theater, and you're like, hold on, everybody.
That's always the worst when I think I spot one in a movie theater, but I have no way of confirming it. Because I don't want to make incorrect claims on here and be like, I spotted a continuity error when I actually got it wrong. So I try to confirm these things when I can.
Yeah. So good. That's good little collectible item for the basket of little things. They always
Put it into our collection of goodies that we have going on with this movie. We got a lot in there. It's great.
We do. I love our collection of goodies. All right. Well, this is our review and discussion of Leave the World Behind. You can find it available out on Netflix. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. So everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review letting us know your thoughts about Leave the World Behind. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at MoviesAndUsPod, or email us at moviesandUsPod@gmail.com. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see you next week.